This is our video project for OT Theory 2. Our group chose a case study with Nancy, who has a diagnosis of depression. Nancy was despondent after her son committed suicide and blames herself for not recognizing his signs of depression. Eventually, she stopped trying to go to work and even stopped trying to get out of bed. Nancy is typically neat. When her ex-husband went to check in on her, however, she was in her nightgown, her apartment had not been cleaned, there was no food in the fridge, and frozen food containers were all over the kitchen. She responded to him with only one-word answers. At the hospital, the psychiatric team decided Nancy required inpatient hospitalization. She didn't respond to conventional medication, so they did ECT or electroconvulsive therapy. The results to ECT were good, but she had some short-term memory loss. It was felt that she was not ready to return to her work and was placed in a day program. Nancy has a history of depression in her family. Her mother was hospitalized in the past for a nervous breakdown, and her grandfather had an unknown mental illness. When evaluated by the OT, Nancy had some short-term memory loss from ECT and was sometimes confused, but the effects should clear in a few weeks. She scored a 5 on Allen's cognitive levels test, which meant that her global cognition was only mildly impaired. Nancy had a flat affect and spoke softly and answered in 1 to 2 word answers. There were not many interests on her interest checklist, but when interviewed one-on-one, she was able to identify past interests, which included reading, cooking, traveling, and gardening. After her divorce, she spent majority of her time at work, even helping her boss on the weekends. When she wasn't working, she went to the movies and went shopping by herself. When Nancy was asked about friendships, she stated, "I don't need them. I had my husband and my son." Nancy was listless and poorly motivated at the day program. She had minimal interaction with others, even though there's a woman who tried to be friends with her there. What we can work on with Nancy is returning to work. Her boss has promised the job will be there as soon as she's ready to come back. This is her #1 priority. We can also work on social participation in her community and with new friends. We can also work on leisure participation with Nancy. The 3 frames of reference we're using in our video project are Model of Human Occupation, or MOHO, Canadian Model of Occupational Performance and Engagement, or CMOPE, and Cognitive Behavioral Therapy, or CBT.
The model of human occupation, also known as MOHO, is a theory that aims at understanding human occupation as motivated, patterned, and performed. The 4 major components in this model are volition, which refers to the motivation to perform the occupation, habituation, which is the habits or routines in which these occupations are performed, performance capacities, which refers to the physical and mental abilities needed to perform occupations, as well as the context and environment, which refers to social, cultural, or professional context or environment in which certain occupations are performed. There are specific components of each of these areas. So for volition, there is personal causation, interest, and valued goals of the individual. Habituation refers to the habits and the internalized roles of the specific individual, and performance capacities are skills needed for the occupational performance. Environment and context, like I said before, is physical, such as the buildings and the physical components around you. Social could be friendships and family relationships, as well as culture and professional, in which certain occupations are performed. In the textbook, Kielhofner and Burke stated man as an occupational creature. Man is the open system who performs the occupation. The occupational performance is the input to the system, and the feedback and information one receives can then alter one's performance in subsequent attempts to achieve better outcomes. This is why MOHO is considered a self-organized and self-transforming model. MOHO can be used for individuals throughout the lifespan and with a wide range of illnesses including Nancy's illness, which is depression. OCARES, also known as the Occupational Circumstances Assessment Interview and Rating Scale, is a standardized assessment instrument composed of a semi-structured interview, rating scale, and summary form. This assessment is structured to gather, analyze, and report data on the extent and nature of a person's occupational performance in daily living. It gathers information on 12 major areas. These areas include roles, habits, personal causation, values, interest, skills, short-term and long-term goals, interpretation of past experiences, readiness for change, and physical and social environments. This assessment will be useful in the case study of Nancy to get a better understanding of values, roles, interests, habits, and how she interacts with her environment. OCARES can be used on a number of different age groups, starting from adolescence all the way to late adulthood. It can also be used in multiple healthcare settings, such as mental health, physical disability, or forensic mental health setting. So for the OCARES activity, since Nancy has a past of enjoying gardening, I thought an appropriate client-centered activity could be bringing in 3 pots, gardening tools, dirt, and a choice between a variety of different plants, flowers, and foliage for Nancy to choose from. Nancy would first choose 3 of whichever type of plant, flower, foliage she wants and desires, and then we would begin to plant it in the pot. After completing the activity, I would ask her to keep one of the pots here so when she returns each week for a session, she can see how much it's grown, and she can take the other 2 pots home and care for it herself. This activity connects back to the MOHO model by including her volition, also known as her motivation, her values, her interests, personal causations of gardening, as well as her habituation and personal skills that she already knows from her past enjoyment and interest in gardening.
For our second model, we're using the Canadian Triple Model, or more specifically, the Canadian Model of Occupational Performance and Engagement, CMOPE. It's a client-centered conceptual model that defines how humans experience meaning through their occupations and the transaction between person-level and environmental-level elements that make this possible. It is grounded in 2 assumptions. Humans need occupation, and occupation has therapeutic value. Occupations bring meaning to life. They also bring structure, organized daily routines and habits, and they are highly personal and idiosyncratic. The guidelines are visually represented in a 3-dimensional figure, showing the dynamic interplay between environment, occupation, person-level components, and the essence of the person, or spirituality. Environment is the outermost circle in green. It depicts the environment in which people exist and occupations occur. The environment influences the person and occupation and is divided into physical, cultural, institutional, and social components. Occupation is shown as the next level in blue. It is classified into 3 purposes, which are self-care, productivity, and leisure. Occupation is used as a means to link person and environment, and a way through which environment is acted upon by the person. The person is at the center of this model, as occupational therapy is always client-centered. It is represented by the yellow triangle. Cognitive, affective, and physical performance components make up the person. And at the center, spirituality is placed, and it is shaped and expressed through occupations. It is the essence of self, and where determination and meaning are drawn from.
The Canadian Occupational Performance Measure, also known as COPM, is a 5-step process. The first step in the process is problem identification. This consists of a semi-structured interview between Nancy and the OT. Areas addressed are self-care, productivity, and leisure. Nancy will identify her needs, wants, or if she is expected to perform in any activities in particular. The next step is problem weighing. Nancy will rate the importance of each area from a scale of 1 to 10, with 10 being the most important. The third step is scoring. Nancy will identify 5 of the most immediate areas she would like to work on. She will rate her ability to perform in these areas and her satisfaction with her current performance using the same 1 to 10 scale. The fourth step is reassessment. Nancy will rate her performance and satisfaction with performance in the original problem areas identified. Ratings are then multiplied by the original importance rating, summed and divided. This helps track Nancy's progress over time. The fifth and final step is follow-up. In this step, Nancy, the OT, and caregivers determine Nancy's treatment, continuation, follow-up, or discharge. So at this point, if Nancy is independent and satisfied with the original problematic areas identified, she may be discharged. However, if she is still having difficulty with the original problematic areas, or if new areas have come about that she would like to work on, she may continue treatment.
The Canadian Triple Model is specifically designed to engage clients in a process of selecting meaningful occupational issues the client perceives as important. This model will provide Nancy an opportunity to immediately identify and prioritize occupational issues from her own perspective. Nancy will help guide the occupational therapist in choosing occupations she wants to work on the most. The occupational therapist will design the interventions and approaches so as not to be overwhelming, but instead bring rapid positive changes in her occupational performance and experience.
Cognitive behavioral therapy acknowledges a person's thoughts, behaviors, and feelings. Thoughts create feelings, which create behaviors, and then the behaviors reinforce their thoughts. They are all connected within a cycle. A therapist may assess what underlying thoughts and feelings project these outward behaviors. If someone is always negative, they tend to disregard positive outlooks on life. As a result, it can lead to depression or suicidal thoughts, which then influence their behaviors. In this case study, a woman believes she was a terrible caretaker because the 2 people that she loves, her son and her husband, are no longer with her. Nancy thinks often about her son who passed away and her ex-husband with plenty of guilt. Before the passing of her son and the divorce of her ex-husband, she did not identify any close friends, stating that, "I don't need them, I had my husband and her son." Now that they are not present in her life, she still has the same thought process by acting minimally with other clients and not pursuing friendships in her group. CBT has 3 theoretical assumptions. The first assumption is about the person and their cognition. Here, you could change a person's thoughts or beliefs, which affect their behavior and occupational performance. This case study has to do with a 56-year-old African American woman named Nancy diagnosed with depression. The second assumption has to do with a person's environment or context. This assumes that structured intervention settings that control distractions and provide opportunities for skill practice and problem solving is most beneficial. The context that we chose is the day hospital program that Nancy attends 5 days a week. The third theoretical assumption is about activity and occupation, that cognitive development theory can be used to modify complexity and promote successful learning. So the activity that we chose was socialization. Under this 3-step cycle, the thought that Nancy had before her husband's divorce and the passing of her son was that she does not need any friends. After that they had passed, that her son had passed and her husband got a divorce, she still has that thought process. This then projected throughout her behavior. Her behavior in the day program was antisocial. She did not want to interact with clients. Next, clients wanted to interact with her, but she did not initiate or regard them. Therefore, no friendships have been made, which then reinforces her belief that she does not need to have friends. Cognitions can be altered at 3 different levels, which are consciousness, automatic thoughts, and schemas. CBT is useful by cognitive reconstructing and recognizing thinking errors by reappraising beliefs about oneself and the world.
The Beck's Depression Inventory is a 21-item self-report rating inventory. This inventory is not a diagnosis, however, it enables a therapist to ask questions that help detect or measure the intensity, severity, and depth of depression and depressive symptoms. In Nancy's case study, it displays that she often isolated herself in the past. She only cared for her son and her husband and didn't identify any other close friends because she states she didn't need them in her life. There was another woman who was trying to befriend Nancy. However, Nancy seems to have little to no interest in becoming friends. If a person scores 0 to 9, it represents minimal depressive symptoms. 10 to 16 indicates mild depression. 17 to 29 represents moderate depression, and 30 to 69 represents severe depression. This assessment will give a better understanding of how severe Nancy's depression is and enables the therapist to come up with strategies to help her get through this issue.
The activity that we chose is coping throughout socialization. Coping refers to processes people use to manage demands, particularly those with potential to overwhelm their internal and external resources. Nancy is diagnosed with depression and is overwhelmed because of that. She is not able to manage her everyday challenges. Emotion-focused coping strategies would help Nancy overcome her depression because this strategy will help her manage her emotions in a negative situation. An example of emotion-focused coping strategy would be joining a support group. The occupational therapist can enroll Nancy in a support group, since Nancy said that she does not have any friends. With the support of a group, Nancy can make friends and have people to express her feelings to. The group can also share coping strategies and experiences that empower each other.